Tonight, Putin preparing for more fighting as he orders the largest military draft in nearly a decade. Putin is calling up 160,000 more Russian citizens to his military. That is the largest conscription in Russia in at least 8 years. And the numbers are really incredible. We just went back and looked at this. Get ready for this. Putin's army has grown from 1 million to 1.5 million people in his military. 1 to 1.5 million. So right now, Putin's army is 50% bigger than the night before he invaded Ukraine. He's added 500,000 more people into his military. This is stunning when you consider how many people are dying a month on his front line. And despite this massive increase, right, largest conscription in 8 years, military 50% bigger than before the war, Trump is taking Putin at his word still that he wants the war to end, which may be part of why Russian TV is now mocking Trump.
We were a great country before America was even discovered as a continent. Not to mention, before America became a nation. Could we imagine, as the New York Times admits, that we would fight America in a war and win? Now we're doing it every day.
Dan Rice is out front now. He is the former special advisor to the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces. Also, of course, himself spent time in Iraq and now a lot here in Ukraine. Dan, I want to ask you about Putin's draft because the numbers are just so stunning. First, though, I want to begin with something that happened here just in these past hours. A strike in Ukraine this weekend, attacks in restaurants in the city of Dnipro. We're showing images of it now. You were actually there, physically there, and you say it was your closest call that you've had in years. At this point in the war, what happened?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Aaron. And yeah, it's incredible that every night the Russian terrorists continue to terrorize Ukraine all across the country. I was in Dnipro, which is a beautiful city down south from Kyiv and close to the front lines. And we were attacked by Russian Shaheeds. Those are the Iranian-supplied drones that attack the city and hit all civilian targets. Like, it's ridiculous. These are just terrorists. The Russians hit the several restaurants and a military hospital they were targeting, and it was a pretty massive attack. We were very close.
And this is as there's some sort of a whatever. I don't know how many quotes you can put around the words ceasefire, but this is what's going on just here in these past hours. And in that context, Dan, let me ask you about what we are learning today, that Putin is ordering 160,000 more troops to come into his military. That's an increase from last year in his conscription, and that his military overall is 500,000 more people now than it was in February of 2022 before he invaded Ukraine itself. So what is the state of the Russian military right now?
Yeah, it's incredible, Aaron. I mean, this is Putin is accelerating the buildup of men, arms, munitions, and is on a war footing. 40% of the GDP of Russia is now going to weapons. It's not going to stop just at Ukraine. I mean, there's a very serious concern that it will continue on to other countries: Moldova, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. That's why they are all arming. That's why they are. This is a very serious situation. Russia is losing a tremendous amount of soldiers. First, they lost a lot of the Wagner group, which were just mercenaries, and nobody in Russia cared about them. Then they lost all of their prisoners that they euthanized, basically. They took all their prisoners. Nobody cared about them. Now they're losing Russian soldiers, and that actually has an impact on the Russian population. They care about their own people, obviously. So you're starting to see, but they're drafting more and more Russians, and so that has an impact. And the Russians are losing right now about 45,000 casualties per month, which is killed and wounded. An enormous amount every month. And Ukraine is increasing that number by killing or wounded more and more Russians, but it's an enormous number.
It's enormous. And of course, as awful as it is to hear all of that, then you just start looking at the math and how Putin can actually manage to get all these more young men, that there are more people in Russia. Putin's closest advisor, Alexander Dugin, he's been referred to as Putin's brain. He's been incredibly influential in this war. He now says Putin is going to launch hypersonic missile strikes on Kyiv to, quote, destroy everything and everyone. Now, he's talking about if the ceasefire gets violated, whatever this ceasefire actually is. So when Putin says, Dan, that he is open to negotiations for a peace deal, in the context of a military that's 50% bigger than it was before this war. Does anyone in Ukraine take that seriously?
I mean, everybody in Ukraine knows you can't trust the Russians. You haven't been able to trust the Russians for 300 years, never mind the last 30 years. They violated every single ceasefire, every single agreement. The Russians, basically, at this point, in my opinion, every war boils down to political, military, and economic issues. The biggest thing for the Russians right now is their economic weakness. They have an Achilles heel. Their weakness is their economy. And right now, I think President Trump is going for the economy. And so Russia is running out of money. They started the war off with $109 billion in reserves. They're almost out of money. And they're losing about 15 billion a month. So Ukrainians follow this incredibly closely. Everything from the Russian economy to the American diplomacy to the Ukrainian situation on the military front. But I think everybody knows that the Russian economy is facing a very big challenge, and that's where the West has to stick together. We will win this.
All right, Dan, thank you very much.
Retired General Wesley Clark is a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. He's also the founder of Renew America Together. Thank you, General, for joining us.
Thank you.
So, as Donald Trump increases his effort to find a path to peace in Ukraine, he's now getting uncharacteristically tough on Russia's Vladimir Putin, threatening secondary sanctions if Putin doesn't get serious about a ceasefire. Why the sudden change in tone, do you think, and will it work on Putin?
Well, I think he realizes that what's being played out is a typical, what was a former Soviet and now a Russian play, which is basically it's a follow-on from what the great German philosopher Clausewitz said. He said, war is politics by other means. And so you fight, you talk, you use diplomacy, you use your combat, and you work to accomplish your objective. And Putin's objective isn't to stop the fighting. If he wanted to stop the fighting, he could do that immediately. All he has to do is stop fighting. Just tell him to pull back. Tell him to stop firing artillery and lobbing drones and missiles in. No, he wants Ukraine. And so the talks are another avenue to put pressure on the government in Kyiv, on the allies, and on the United States. And I think President Trump is finally starting to see this. He's going to put a little bit of pressure on Putin. But, you know, saying that you're angry and threatening sanctions, that's not real pressure yet.
So would you suggest he applies the pressure through sanctions now?
Well, yes, sanctions now, but I think also you have to do more to support Kyiv militarily. Ultimately, Putin's in this to win. And you won't get the agreement that's a stable peace so long as Mr. Putin believes he's winning and can win if he persists. So it's not just a matter of the sanctions. Putin's done pretty well at dealing with sanctions. He's got strong support from China. They're putting in all the industrial equipment he needs. He's working his military industrial complex 24/7. These other stands in Central Asia they're bringing in U.S. and European electronics and other things and then passing them right to the Russians. So those sanctions aren't working that well. And so saying you're going to put secondary sanctions on oil, sure. Everything helps. Put it on and give Kyiv more military assistance.